Hi, thanks for coming in today. Please make yourself comfortable. Can I get you anything before we start?
No, I am fine. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you making the time. I have to be honest, I am not entirely sure what to expect from today. A colleague recommended I speak to a UX researcher before we go any further with our app, but I'm still learning what that actually means in practice.
That is a completely fair starting point, and one of the best reasons to have this conversation early. Can you tell me a little about the app and where you are right now?
Of course, we're a small team building a mobile app for independent personal trainers. It helps them manage their clients, track workout progress, and handle scheduling all in one place. We launched a basic version about 4 months ago, and the feedback has been mixed. Some users love it, others seem to drop off quite quickly without really telling us why.
That drop-off pattern is exactly what UX research is designed to investigate. When users leave without explanation, it usually means something in the experience is creating friction they can't easily put into words. They just stop rather than complain. My job is to find out what that friction is and where it comes from.
That's a really useful way of framing it. We've been looking at our analytics and we can see where people leave, but we have genuinely no idea why. The numbers tell us what is happening, but nothing about the reason behind it.
Exactly. That's the gap between quantitative and qualitative research. Your analytics give you the what, user research gives you the why. Once you understand why a user abandons a screen, you can fix the right thing rather than guessing.
So what would the research process actually look like for something like our app?
For a situation like yours, I would typically recommend starting with a round of user interviews combined with usability testing. The interviews give us a chance to understand who your users actually are, what their day looks like, and what they're trying to achieve when they open the app. The usability testing lets us watch real users attempt specific tasks and see exactly where they struggle, hesitate, or give up.
When you say watch real users, what does that involve? Do they come into a studio or does it happen remotely?
Both are possible, and both have their advantages. In-person sessions let you read body language and pick up on nonverbal cues. Remote sessions are more flexible and easier to recruit for, especially if your users are spread across different locations. For a mobile app used by personal trainers, remote testing often works very well because we can observe people using the app in the kind of environment they would naturally use it in, rather than a controlled room.
That makes a lot of sense. How many users would you typically need to test with to get useful results?
It depends on the research goals, but for usability testing, you often get strong insights from a small number of participants. 5 to 8 users tends to surface the most significant patterns. Beyond that, you start seeing the same issues repeat rather than finding new ones. For the interview phase, we would aim for 8 to 12 participants to ensure a range of perspectives.
I was expecting you to say we'd need much larger numbers. That's reassuring.
It's a common assumption. Usability research isn't the same as a survey where sample size matters enormously. The value comes from depth of observation rather than volume of responses. One person struggling with the same step 3 times tells you something concrete and actionable. 1,000 responses saying the app is confusing tells you far less about what to change.
That's a really clear distinction. Can I ask, what kinds of things do you typically uncover that the product team hasn't already noticed?
The most common finding is that what the team built makes perfect sense to the people who built it, but is genuinely unclear to a first-time user. Teams become close to their own product and lose the ability to see it through fresh eyes. We call this the curse of knowledge. Another common discovery is that users create workarounds for problems the team didn't know existed. Those workarounds are often the most valuable insight of all because they reveal a need the product is not meeting.
The curse of knowledge. That's a phrase I'm definitely going to remember. I think we're probably guilty of that. We assume our users understand things that we've never actually explained.
Most teams are, and it's not a criticism. It's simply what happens when you're close to something for a long time. The research process creates distance and gives you back the beginner's perspective that you had before you knew the product inside out.
Once you completed the interviews and usability testing, what happens with all of that information?
We go through a process called synthesis, which means making sense of everything observed and heard. We look for patterns across participants, identify the most significant pain points, and group them into themes. From that, we produce a research report with clear findings and concrete recommendations that the product team can act on directly.
How long does a typical project like this take from start to finish?
For a focused round of research covering interviews and usability testing, you're typically looking at 4 to 6 weeks from planning through to the final report. That includes writing the discussion guides, recruiting participants, conducting the sessions, analyzing the data, and presenting the findings. It's thorough, but it moves at a pace that keeps momentum in the product cycle.
That fits well with our timeline. One thing I want to ask about is our onboarding flow specifically. We suspect that's where a lot of users are dropping off in the first few days. Can research focus on a specific part of the product like that?
Absolutely. Focused research on a specific flow is actually very common and often the most efficient place to start. If your data suggests onboarding is the problem area, we can design the research entirely around that journey and get very specific, actionable answers quickly. We would observe users going through the onboarding process from the very first screen and capture every moment of confusion, hesitation, or frustration along the way.
That sounds exactly like what we need. Is there anything we should prepare or have ready before research begins?
The most helpful thing is access to your current analytics so we can understand the drop-off points you're already aware of. A list of the core tasks you want users to be able to complete would also be very useful. And if you have any previous feedback from users, whether from reviews, emails, or support tickets, that context helps us write better research questions and focus the sessions on the areas that matter most.
We have all of those things. I feel like this conversation has already helped us think more clearly about what we actually need. We came in thinking we had a design problem, and I'm starting to realize we might have a knowledge problem.
That's a very insightful way to put it, and one of the most valuable shifts that research creates. You stop guessing what users need and start finding out with real evidence. The design problem is almost always easier to solve once you understand the knowledge gap sitting behind it.
Can I ask something slightly different? We have a few team members who are quite resistant to the idea of doing user research. They feel like they already know what users need. How do you usually handle that kind of pushback?
It comes up often, and it's completely understandable. People who have built something invest a lot in it. The most effective approach is not to argue against their assumptions, but to invite them into the research process. When a developer or product manager watches a real user struggle with something they designed, it changes their perspective far more powerfully than any report could. Evidence witnessed directly lands differently than evidence read about secondhand.
That's a really smart way to handle it. I might try to get a few of our team members to observe some of the sessions.
That's genuinely one of the most impactful things you can do. Even one observed session tends to shift the conversation inside a team quite significantly.
I'm really glad my colleague pointed me in this direction. What would be a sensible next step from here?
The next step would be for me to put together a brief research proposal, outlining the recommended approach, the timeline, and exactly what you can expect to receive at the end. That gives you something concrete to review with your team before committing to anything. I can have that with you within a couple of days.
That would be perfect. Thank you so much for your time today. This conversation has genuinely changed how I'm thinking about the whole problem.
That's exactly what a good first conversation should do. These early discovery meetings are honestly always my favorite part of a project. I'll be in touch very soon.
Thank you.